His income dropped from £3.7 million to just over £100,000 in under 12 months. Not because he lost a contract, but because a recording device confirmed what a lot of people had quietly wondered for years. That man is David Walliams. And by the time this video ends, you'll understand exactly why the collapse of one of Britain's most recognizable entertainment careers didn't come as a complete surprise to the people who had been paying attention. For a decade, David Walliams was the warm one. Simon Cowell was the authority figure. Amanda Holden was glamour. Alicia Dixon brought genuine credibility. And Walliams was the comedian, the man-child who'd cry at a kid's performance, pull faces behind Cowell's back, and always find the punchline. The audience loved him for it. He was the approachable one, the safe one, the one you trusted with Britain's most wholesome Saturday night. That image had been carefully constructed over a long time. It didn't start with BGT. It started in a grammar school in Surrey, where a kid named David Edward Williams was figuring out that being funny was the fastest way to get a room's attention. He'd grow up to study drama at the University of Bristol, where he met Matt Lucas, and the two of them would spend years grafting on the UK comedy circuit before exploding into mainstream culture with Little Britain in the early 2000s. Little Britain was a phenomenon. Catchphrases embedded themselves in everyday speech. The characters became household names. And Walliams, by his own account, became addicted to the attention that came with it. He has been open about his diagnosis of bipolar disorder and has described certain periods of his life, including a solo swim of the English Channel in 2006, as acts of self-searching, even desperation, more than athletic achievement. The England Channel swim raised millions for sport relief. It also cemented a second image: Walliams, the philanthropist, Walliams, the brave one. By 2008, he pivoted again. He published his first children's book, The Boy in the Dress, and somehow the man who had built a career on broad, often offensive sketch comedy became one of the most beloved children's authors in British history. Within a decade, he'd sold over 60 million books worldwide. At one point, his titles accounted for 44% of all children's book sales at HarperCollins, generating £100 million in revenue for the publisher by 2019. Alone, 2 careers, 2 audiences, the same person. And that's when the decision was made, the one nobody around him saw coming. In 2012, Walliams joined Britain's Got Talent as a judge, and the show gave him something even books couldn't: a primetime audience of millions every week watching him be himself, or what looked like himself. The thing about live television production, especially a show of BGT's scale, is that nothing is truly off. Microphones placed at the judge's desk were designed to capture conversations between judges that could potentially be used in broadcast. That's standard practice. What Walliams apparently didn't fully reckon with was the scale of what was being captured and stored. According to his own legal filings made at the High Court in London, the production company Fremantle had accumulated roughly 1,700 hours of audio over the course of his 10-year tenure on the show. Everything, not just what happened on camera, not just the conversations during deliberations, everything he said during breaks, everything he said in the corridors. At one point, his own lawyers had to acknowledge that conversations captured included him discussing his struggle with food addiction, his grief over the death of his father, and the breakdown of his marriage. He was being recorded for a decade and had no idea. When the transcript finally leaked to The Guardian in November 2022, it was 2 incidents that made it into print. During a January 2020 audition at the London Palladium, an elderly male performer engaged in some banter with the judges before leaving the stage following an unsuccessful audition. Once that man was out of earshot, Walliams referred to him using a highly offensive slur and did so 3 times. Later in the same session, after a female contestant completed her audition and walked off, Walliams made derogatory and sexually explicit comments about her that were, by any reasonable standard, deeply disrespectful. His public statement was brief. He called them private conversations that were never intended to be shared. He apologized, and within weeks it was confirmed he would not be returning to Britain's Got Talent. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet. Most people assumed that was the end of it. Walliams out, Bruno Tonioli in, move on, but Walliams wasn't finished. In September 2023, 10 months after leaving the show, he filed legal documents at the High Court in London. The target was Fremantle, the production company behind BGT. The claim was data protection breach. His position, the transcripts of his private conversations, should never have existed in the form they did, and their publication caused him serious and quantifiable harm. The legal filing ran to 21 pages. It alleged that Fremantle had retained transcripts of everything Walliams said across his entire run on the show, and that these had been made available to Simon Cowell's co-production company, Psycho, upon request. Walliams was seeking damages for psychiatric harm, financial loss, distress, and loss of control over his own private information. The total figure being sought was up to £10 million. The financial details inside that filing are the ones that land hardest when you read them. In 2022, the year everything came apart, Walliams had earned £3.7 million. In the first 5 months of 2023, his total recorded earnings were £101,800. That is not a dip. That is a career going quiet, almost overnight. A scheduled reading at Buckingham Palace with Queen Camilla, canceled. A planned podcast with his Little Britain co-creator, Matt Lucas, canceled. Television appearances, canceled. 1 new work booking in an entire year. The lawsuit settled in November 2023. Fremantle issued a statement acknowledging their security procedures had failed and expressing sincere regret that Walliams's private conversations had been published. The settlement figure was not officially disclosed, but multiple reports indicated it was significantly lower than the £10 million sought, with insiders suggesting a figure closer to £1 million. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. The thing about the BGT leak is that it shocked people, but not entirely, and that distinction matters. When the transcript ran in The Guardian, it generated immediate public backlash. Fans called for Walliams to be removed. Piers Morgan publicly described him as one of the nastiest frauds in television. But buried beneath the outrage, particularly in the comment sections and fan forums of the time, was something else. People who said they weren't completely surprised. They pointed to things that had been visible for years. Walliams had been repeatedly pulled up by BGT bosses for on-set behavior that pushed past what a family show could accommodate. As far back as 2014, Simon Cowell told the Daily Mirror that Walliams overstepped the mark sometimes on live shows, adding that telling him not to do something only encouraged him to do it more. A TV insider had described Walliams' behavior on set as that of a schoolboy in his first week back after summer holidays who couldn't resist showing off, even when bosses had already spoken to him. The audience watching at home saw a lovable eccentric. The people working around him described something more difficult to manage. That gap between the public warmth and the private behavior is the central question of Walliams' career. And it's a question that didn't go away when the BGT chapter closed. Little Britain had already been pulled from several major streaming platforms by 2020. The show that made his name, the one that launched everything, was quietly removed from Netflix, BBC iPlayer, and BritBox amid growing criticism of its use of racially insensitive characters and stereotypes, including Walliams himself performing in blackface. That had happened before the BGT transcript, before the lawsuit, before any of what came next. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. Parallel to all of this, the BGT collapse, the lawsuit, the reputational fallout, Walliams was still one of the most commercially powerful children's authors in British publishing. That's the part that kept the machine running longer than it probably should have. His books had made HarperCollins an enormous amount of money. Gangsta Granny, Billionaire Boy, Mr. Stink, the world's worst children's series, decade after decade of consistent bestsellers that translated into 55 languages and shifted over 60 million copies globally. In 2025, he even published The World's Worst Superheroes, extending the same franchise that had been running since 2016. HarperCollins had every commercial incentive to keep that relationship intact, and for a while, they did. But what was happening inside the company, away from the publishing floors and book launch events, was something very different. According to reporting by the Daily Telegraph, HarperCollins had been conducting an internal investigation for over a year into allegations that Walliams had engaged in inappropriate and harassing behavior toward junior female employees at the company. The Telegraph reported that one woman who raised concerns was given a 5-figure settlement and subsequently left the company. Female staff were reportedly advised not to visit Walliams alone and to attend meetings with him in pairs. In December 2025, HarperCollins made its decision. The company announced it would not be publishing any further titles by David Walliams. New CEO Kate Elton, who had taken over from Charlie Redmayne in October 2025, delivered the decision. The statement was precise and brief. After careful consideration, and under the leadership of its new CEO, HarperCollins UK has decided not to publish any new titles by David Walliams. By the summer of 2025, his book sales had already fallen by 60%. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. Walliams denied the HarperCollins allegations completely. His spokesperson released a statement saying he had never been informed of any allegations raised against him, was not party to any investigation, and was not given any opportunity to answer questions. The statement called the allegations false and confirmed he was taking legal advice. His position was, essentially, the same as it had been with the BGT transcript. Private matters, taken out of context, handled without him being given a fair chance to respond. Whether that legal strategy will produce a different outcome than it did in 2023 remains to be seen. What's notable is the shape of the narrative. The BGT fallout was framed by many as a one-time failure of judgment, a man caught saying things in private that he shouldn't have said. The HarperCollins investigation, as reported, described a pattern of conduct toward young women in a professional environment over an extended period. These are separate allegations from separate institutions, both of which reached similar conclusions. The audience that watched Walliams every Saturday night for a decade saw a man who genuinely appeared to enjoy people, who cried at acts that moved him, who championed underdogs, who seemed instinctively warm. The people who reported concerns to HarperCollins described something different. The court filings in the Fremantle case described something different. The question that BGT fans have been quietly sitting with since the transcript first ran in 2022 is the same one that gets louder with every new development. Which version was real? One phone call, one conversation. That's all it took to change the direction of everything. The story of David Walliams isn't a story about a microphone. It's a story about what happens when two versions of the same person stop being able to coexist. For 20 years, the career worked because the public version and the private version stayed in separate rooms. The sketch comedy with its boundary-pushing characters was excused as satire. The children's books offset the controversy with wholesomeness. The BGT panel made him a national favorite. Each new identity absorbed the damage from the last. Little Britain came under scrutiny for its racial content. Walliams kept going. The on-set behavior was flagged by producers. Walliams kept going. The 2022 transcript leaked and cost him £3.6 million in annual earnings almost overnight. Walliams kept going, filed a lawsuit, published more books, maintained that the private man and the public man were separate things, and that only one of them deserved to be judged. The HarperCollins decision in December 2025 ended that argument. Because this wasn't a microphone picking up a rogue comment in a break between auditions. This was a year-long investigation conducted by a publisher that had every commercial reason to keep him. HarperCollins made £100 million from his books. Dropping him meant losing the most commercially successful children's author on their roster, at a time when his backlist was still generating meaningful sales. They dropped him anyway. That is not a decision companies make lightly, and it is not the kind of decision that can be framed as an out-of-context private moment. The BGT transcript confirmed what the on-set reports had suggested. The HarperCollins investigation confirmed what the BGT transcript suggested. The shape of that pattern is not invisible anymore. As of early 2026, David Walliams's career sits in a state of genuine uncertainty. He is, by his own public statements, taking legal advice in response to the HarperCollins decision. Whether that will produce another lawsuit or some form of settlement is not yet known. His children's books, more than 40 titles translated into 55 languages, remain in print with existing publishers, and the backlist continues to generate sales, even at reduced levels. But HarperCollins, the company that built his literary empire and carried him for nearly 2 decades, has closed the door on any future with him. There is no confirmed television work. There is no BGT return. Bruno Tonioli remains on the panel. There is no word on whether any broadcaster is prepared to take on the risk of attaching Walliams' name to a new program. Simon Cowell, who told reporters in 2023 that he found Walliams' lawsuit claims bizarre, has not publicly commented on the HarperCollins news. Amanda Holden, who once described Walliams' BGT exit as sad, has also been silent. The people who shared a desk with him for a decade have, by and large, stayed out of it. What Walliams does next, legally, professionally, personally, is genuinely unknown. He is 54 years old. He has, by any measure, one of the more complicated public profiles in British entertainment, brilliant enough to sustain 2 parallel careers for 2 decades, and now, for the first time, without a platform to sustain either. The story isn't over, but it looks very different from where it started. For years, fans watched David Walliams on that judging panel and felt something they couldn't quite put into words. A slight dissonance between the warmth they were being shown and the energy underneath it. The transcripts gave those feelings a name. The lawsuit gave them a legal document. The HarperCollins investigation gave them a pattern. None of that makes what comes next easy to watch for anyone. A man with genuine talent, genuine charitable work, and genuine cultural impact, watching it all contract around a series of decisions that can't be walked back. What's next is unclear. A legal fight with his former publisher, a backlist still in circulation, and a public reputation that will take years to settle into whatever shape it eventually takes. So here's the question worth sitting with. Do you think the BGT version of David Walliams, the warm one, the funny one, the man who cried at underdogs, was ever the real one? Or was that performance the most successful act the show ever produced? Leave your answer below.